What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is the 2023 Toyota GR Supra manual. Finally, we have a manual transmission here in the Supra, and it's so great that it's not only that it's here, but it's also not in some just limited edition. You know, it's a mass-produced option. It's a no-cost option to get the manual here, and it's great that the Supra continues to be pretty well priced, starting at $53,595 for the manual. It's only on the 3.0 versions of the Supra, but I mean, just a great starting price here. Puts it right neck and neck with the Nissan Z basically. And so now this one I'm standing next to here is the A91 Special Edition, which is here in this matte white color they're calling Burnout, and otherwise the Supra looks the same. You still have these new forged wheels though here for 2023 that look nice. Another little change here is in addition to this Burnout color, there's also a couple new colors, including a Stratosphere blue color, which looks really nice and a great option you can get now on the Supras. Otherwise though, the Supra I think continues to really be a great looking design. I think that it's aged well over the past few years here. It still seems to get a lot of attention, turn a lot of heads. People seem to love the way it looks still. So from every angle, I still think the Supra looks great. The interior of the manual Supra is unique here for the center console area, and that is really the big change. So they moved the little controller wheel for the infotainment system over to the right a little bit more to give you sufficient space and clearance here for the manual transmission shifter. And aside from that though, everything is the same as any other Supra here. They haven't made any changes really. There's also a new tan color interior you can get on the A91 Special Edition. I mean, the interior in the Supra is still a very nice place to be. The only thing I will say though is with the manual here, I'll talk more about the manual shifter as we get out driving, but what I've found is that the way that this is set up and the angle that it's at and the way I'm sitting at least, my elbow keeps just going into the cup holders here, which is fine. It's just that it's not super comfortable since my elbow isn't actually resting on the padding. The padding is a little bit off to the left, so you're going to end up, whenever you're shifting, just having your elbow resting in a cup holder here. But I mean, there's really nowhere else to put the cup holder, so it's kind of an inevitable problem you're just going to have. Otherwise though, the Supra interior is a very nice place to be. If you want to hear all my thoughts on a Supra interior, I did have a separate interior review video that I already did a couple years back, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all my thoughts on the Supra interior. The only thing I will also add is that this BMW infotainment system that they use still, it's really hard to use. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I really wish they could find a way to just use Toyota's infotainment software. It's so much better. It's so much easier to use, and this is just not great to use, this infotainment system. It's just way too confusing. And even stuff like wireless smartphone integration, just trying to connect my phone to wireless Apple CarPlay, like it took forever to connect. It was buried in a bunch of submenus just to even get it to connect. It's not a great experience, unfortunately. I wish they could find some way to ditch the BMW infotainment software, but other than that, this interior is still a very nice place to be. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The manual Supra still has the same key as any other Supra here with the red stripe on it, Toyota logo. It's not super nice or impressive or anything, but gets the job done. It's, of course, keyless access, keyless entry, push button start in all the Supras. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and now put the clutch in, and it starts right up. And still does a nice little rev whenever you start it up. The little crackles and pops, always appreciated. All right, so setting off here in the manual Supra. So first thing I'm noticing here about it is the shifter. So it's a little bit of a longer throw than I'm used to in other BMWs in the past, and it feels really nice though. It has a very notchy feel to it, so it really feels like it wants to kind of resist going into the gate just a tiny bit, just nice and notchy. It just takes a little more muscle to use than the average softer manual transmission you get on other vehicles these days. It just feels really good. And they also revised the steering and suspension tuning here for all 2023 Supras, and well, I mean, I actually did just drive the automatic 2022 on the way out to the track here this morning. It still feels pretty similar to me. There are a good amount of little changes they've made to all 2023 Supras here, but as far as the manual, other manual impressions here. So it has the intelligent rev matching you can do as well, and not only does it do the auto rev match for the downshifts, but it also will optimize the amount of torque that's being put out whenever you're upshifting, and just kind of helps them maximize traction. And it feels really nice. Other things here, the clutch is I'd say the clutch definitely has a BMW kind of feel to it, but it is unique. So it has a larger diameter clutch disc, and also has a diaphragm spring that's unique here. And even though the transmission is supplied by ZF, it's been completely uniquely engineered by the GR engineers. They went through and they used some existing components, an existing transmission gear set and existing housing, but they did remove some sound deadening materials here in this, so that it's actually a little bit lighter than other, I guess, manuals from ZF. And so, it just all feels really nice. going through some shifts here. Yeah, feels really good though. It just takes a little more muscle with this shifter, but it feels really good still, and it's not like it's going to be a workout or anything. It's still, you know, far from being as tough to use as, you know, some of the old school manuals from way back when. And there's a little crackle and pop out of the exhaust. I was wondering if the manual is going to still crackle and pop as much, and I'm not sure. So I'm in sport mode, and typically in an automatic Supra, you accelerate, and you'd have some really loud crackles and pops. You still get crackles and pops here. I do get some crackles and pops, but I don't think it's as loud as the automatic. The exhaust is the same, by the way, so there's no changes with that. I think it's just, you know, the automatic's the way they tune those so that you can have those crackles and pops. You kind of lose that, and that's not only this manual. A lot of manuals, when you go from auto to manual, you do have, you know, some loss of that, but it still sounds so good. And I have to say, I mean, since everyone's going to be comparing this to the Z, and rightly so, I just drove the Z a few months back, and, you know, this just sounds so much better. I'm so glad they gave this thing a good exhaust. That's one thing the Z was definitely lacking, and this motor still feels really good too. So as far as the gearing and the spacing of the gears, so essentially, and this is a very rough generalization, but essentially get rid of first and eighth out of the 8-speed automatic Supra, and that's kind of where the upper gears lie. Now, as far as the lower gears, you know, like first gear in this kind of splits the difference between first and second in the automatic, and same thing as far as, you know, going to second and third, but they get closer and closer as you go up. So essentially, you know, sixth gear in this is going to be pretty similar to cruising in seventh in your automatic Supra on the highway. Just to give you, I mean, it's not exact, but a rough approximation. I will list all the differences in the gear ratios there for anyone who's curious about the exact numbers, but it's definitely, I think, a really good setup though. That's one thing I noticed. I already took this on the track already. On the track in the automatic, whenever I was on the launch for the automatic Supra a few years back, that, you know, third gear was great. We were taking around VIR. We're out here at Utah Motorsports campus today, but third gear was just like the champ gear that in the automatic you could just leave in third all day, and that was, you know, sufficient for most of your driving, and it just was such a strong gear. And it's the same here in this. Third gear is still the same great gear, and it's just, you know, just got such breadth to it. It has lots of low end punch, but still lots of top end. And, oh, there's some good crackling there. Alright, it still sounds really good, so I'm not going to nitpick about the crackling, even if it's a little less than the automatic. Not a big deal, nothing to certainly focus on. And, you know, I'd say that the gates are all nicely spaced out, really easy to find, and just feels really good. I love that they still do the crackles and pops. And yeah, this thing is, it's so strong still. So, you know, you still run the same great inline 6-cylinder, 3-liter turbocharged engine. It still does 382 horsepower, 368 pound-feet of torque, and, you know, 0 to 60 though here for the manual, it's going to be about 0.3 seconds slower than the automatic. So they're quoting a 4.2 second 0 to 60 time for this versus the 3.9 second time you get in the automatic. So, you know, but 0.3 seconds really isn't bad. You know, some other vehicles with the manual, you lose out on half a second or something. This, you know, you have no sacrifice really. I mean, it's a very small, you know, slowdown for the extra fun and engagement of the manual here. But I'm going to do an acceleration here, just a rolling acceleration. Nice little chirp on second. And yeah, it feels really nice. So it's definitely a longer throw though, so it's a little tricky to rush your shifts in this versus, you know, just obviously the automatic's gonna be way easier. But compared to other manuals, I just found myself in this, I kind of need to give myself an extra little split second, you know, to go through the gate there. And got a little bit of a slalom course here. We can test out the handling a little bit more. Still running Mission Pilot Super Sport tires, by the way, which is kind of interesting. I thought that they would maybe have swapped to the, you know, Sport 4S or something like that, but still Pilot Super Sports, still have, you know, same grip characteristics. And the Supra now has a hairpin plus mode, and so what that will do is whenever you're on a grade going uphill that's greater than 5%, it will allow some more wheel spin and a greater variance of wheel spin between the right and the left tires, so that, you know, you can have more freewheeling, as they call it, and, you know, so it'll give you a more emotional experience, you know, carving up, going up, you know, a canyon or something like that, which is really cool for tight switchbacks and hairpins and all that. So it's cool that it has that, but also there's a new thing in the vehicle stability control control system where it it's called anti-roll control, and so it essentially prevents you from having any snap off oversteer. So snap oversteer, you know, having that definitely is not good, especially if you're trying to carve up a canyon. So it's really nice that, you know, they've kind of retuned you know, the stability control so that you have, you know, a little bit more stability, and it tries to, you know, make sure that things don't get too out of hand. And also, if you go for the manual, you do get a weight savings of 22 pounds compared to the automatic. So these are 33.89 for their curb weight, and so you know, just great that you have a little bit of extra lightness there to go along with the pure manual experience here. Yeah, these things are so strong, feel so good. But that's about all I need to say here on this little road we're on, because we're only on this ring road around the track. You'll have to subscribe and stay tuned for me to get one of these as a press vehicle later this fall. Hopefully I'll be able to actually test it out on my own roads. But what I can say is, you know, on this road, which, you know, definitely has some bumps to it and stuff, you know, it still is the same comfort level as any other Supra. Don't expect any kind of wild difference between this and the automatic as far as suspension comfort goes. Overall, it's still just a very nice vehicle to, you know, cruise around in, even whenever you aren't, you know, pushing it and stuff. And there's a nice little crackle and pop. But let's go to the track, and I'll talk more about how this thing handles whenever you're pushing it a little bit. So out on the track in this Supra, it was a ton of fun, of course. Now, I only had time to do a few laps, so this isn't going to be any kind of in-depth track analysis. But what I can say is that it still is very tail happy. You know, you can't hide that short wheelbase here of the Supra, and the fact that, you know, it's just so punchy and so torquey. You know, it just all combines to make a vehicle that still is very tail happy, even with that anti-roll control. It certainly does help. You know, again, I didn't have enough time to push it to really see, you know, too much of those handling characteristics to try and provoke any kind of snap oversteer, but I trust that it does certainly help. And I think it's also just a combination of the shorter final drive here you have with the manual Supras that makes it feel just as punchy as the automatic, which is so hard to do. That's something I can't say enough, is there are so many vehicles going from automatic to manual where the manual feels like it's slower, it's less exciting, and the Supra just doesn't have that. It's amazing how they were able to kind of avoid that whole disappointment, and so it's just very impressive with this being so punchy. They did a great job with the gear ratios and that final drive. Also, another great thing about the gearbox is that, first off, there's no rev hang. I couldn't find any kind of rev hang or any kind of situation where it ever kind of caught me off guard. Now, there were a couple of times where it did try and lock me out of second whenever I was doing like a red line shift from first to second, so you're gonna have to take that first to second shift a little slower, I think, sometimes. But aside from that, it was great. There's also no gear whine. That's one thing I noticed in the Z with its manual, the Nissan Z. I mean, that manual definitely had a good amount of gear whine, and it was kind of surprising for a brand new car in 2022 to have that much gear whine from the factory. This has no whine, even though they did get rid of some of the sound deadening stuff. Still was totally quiet for the gearbox, and overall just a really great experience with the manual out on the track. So a couple of things I briefly want to mention here before I go is that the safety tech here in the Supra, with the manual, you lose out on the automatic emergency braking and the adaptive cruise control that you would have in other Supras. So I'm not sure why they weren't able to keep the adaptive cruise with the manual, because they do have adaptive cruise with the manual in the GR Corolla, but for some reason it's not here in the Supra. So just one thing I wanted to make you guys aware of. The other thing is fuel economy does take a little bit of a dip as well here. So you lose out on about 3 mpg in each metric and 4 mpg combined for the manual here. So I don't know how people really care about that, but just worth noting, you will get better fuel economy in the automatic. Obviously, having that taller cruising gear really helps. But lastly, you know, I'm just really impressed by the pricing here, and the fact that the manual is a no-cost option. It's not some rare limited edition version. You know, it's available on any normal 3.0 Supra and also on the A91 Special Edition here. And you know, I'm just glad that, you know, these start at $53,595, totally reasonable. You know, a couple grand more than the Z, but I have to say, you know, this feels tighter than the Z. It sounds better than the Z. The motor feels stronger than the Z. Even though the Z has more quoted horsepower, this feels punchier to me. The way the gearing is done maybe is just a little bit better. This feels like it really wants to rip your head off a lot more than the Z. It definitely, you know, I think the Z, it has its place. You know, if you want something a little more comfortable, a little softer, more grand tourer, I think the Z will be great for that. But I think if you're looking for something that's a little bit of a, you know, sharper sports car, this is definitely going to be the way to go, and certainly worth, you know, a couple grand more than, you know, those Zs, which are, you know, around 50, 51, something like that. But overall, I'm very impressed here with the manual Supra. It's an absolute blast. I'm so glad they've given people the option now, and you know, made it very easy to get. By the way, these are already starting to arrive at dealers, so if you want one, you can, you know, place an order or try and hunt one down at a dealer lot. But it's great that, you know, they're already arriving here in time for the fall. And yeah, so anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the GR Supra manual. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with the opportunity to take the Supra out here on the track and on this little road here. Be sure to stay tuned again for my road drive of one of these eventually. And anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.